All right, welcome to the call, everyone. This is Jeremy Miner. We're going to start here in about 3 to 4 minutes from now. I got on a few minutes early just to make sure that the conferencing system was actually working properly. I will be your host tonight. Probably 95% of these weekly training calls, I will be the one doing the training on them. If I ever travel, which I very rarely do, I will bring on one of my top income earners that I've actually trained for the last several years that is making at least $500,000 a year or more in commissions to do this training call, which will be rare. Like I said, I will actually be the one training on this call 95% of the time. So if you're on, welcome to the call. We're going to start here in about 3 minutes. Usually start pretty punctual and on time. So grab a pen and a piece of paper. We will be starting in about 3 minutes. I know a lot of you listen to this as a recorded call, which I'm completely fine with. We've got members in Australia to England to pretty much everywhere in Europe now, and we just launched a few months ago. It's kind of crazy how it's spread. So wherever you're at in the world, you might be listening to this as a recorded version after this, or you might be here on the live, but welcome to the training call tonight.
Brett Martinson.
Hey, Brett. Jeremy Miner. How's it going?
Hey, Jeremy.
Hey.
Good.
We're going to start here in about 2 minutes. We've got several people that just came on the last 5 minutes or so. We'll start here in about 2 minutes, and we're good to go.
Perfect.
Hey, got your email. I'll have to take a look at that. We might have time to look at it tonight. I just haven't had time to really read it. So if we don't get it to it tonight, I will go through it next week for you. I just want to make sure that I actually have time to even look at it to make sure that it's written properly.
Yeah. Understand? Yeah, good.
I'm not a wing it type of dude, you know?
How was prom?
Oh, yeah, you saw that. You probably saw one of my Facebook posts or something. Yeah, so that's my oldest daughter, Cammie. She's 15. Everybody's like, what, you have a 15-year-old daughter? Yeah, I got married when I was 21. And had her, within a year later. So I'm a young dad, I guess. So she's 15. It was her freshman year prom, and pretty exciting times for her. I let her date take her in one of my cars, so I was just making sure that they were no issues, like straight to prom, straight back home type of thing. You're a freshman, you're coming straight home after prom. You're not going anywhere else.
Like a junior prom, senior prom?
Actually, in her school, you can go to prom as a freshman, sophomore, junior, and senior. When I was in high school, you could only go if you were a junior or senior, so a little bit different in the high school I came
So her
from.
date was older,
Yeah, he was a sophomore. So she was a freshman, but you can actually go to their high school as a freshman to go to prom, which is kind of weird. All right, everybody, welcome. We've got several people on here. We're going to get started. Call is being recorded as we speak right now, so welcome. This is Jeremy Miner. I know a lot of you listen to the recorded version of this. We have members of Seven Figure Sales Training really everywhere now, New Zealand, Australia, different parts of Asia, Singapore, Malaysia. I was just looking through this the other day. The United Kingdom, pretty much a lot of the countries in Europe, everywhere here in North America, even South America. It's kind of spread pretty quickly, and we only launched really 60 days ago, so kind of crazy. So welcome, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and mute the floor real quick just to make sure we're all in kind of a quiet area. If you don't mind, also you can mute your phone. If you're on a cell phone, just obviously press the mute button. If you're on a landline, which probably most of you are not, but if you are, just press *6. Okay, so like I said, welcome to the call. Jeremy Miner here. Okay, so a couple quick things. So this is a brand new service that I'm offering members of the Seven Figure Sales Training community. Like I said, we launched the company. We launched the individual trainings, the webinars, several different products I put together about 60 days ago. And I wanted to make sure that I was there available for you every single week because, I kept getting all these emails and texts and messages just all the time like, hey, now that I've gone through your 8-week sales training, program, or I've gone through the 5 principles of 7-figure sales training, or I've, I've got this product, I've gone through it, I've got that. Like, what's next? Like, how do I have access to you every single week? So I wanted to make sure we had a weekly call every single week. I wanted to make sure it was very affordable for really anyone. So I think I'm letting you guys on here access. Everybody on here should only be paying like $47 a month. I really lowered the price down for everybody to make sure that you really have access to me every single week, so you literally master the material. So you don't go out there and, by just going through my training, you can go out there, and a lot of you, I'm already hearing results like, hey, I've just, last 60 days, I've like doubled my sales already, just by going through some of your training. I've already got, 3 or 4 extra sales per week. I'm already at 10 or 15 or 20 grand a month. I was making 6 or 7 last month. So, those are obviously really good results, and I like hearing that, but I want to make sure that I'm here for you every day because you're going to have different sales situations come up, and because you're not as familiar with the material you've gone through, you might not know how to handle it the best way like I would, if that makes sense. So, for example, we had a gentleman on here I was just talking to a minute ago named Brett, and I'm kind of learning what he sells, and he sent me the thing like, hey, can you tell me how to structure this email in the right way using your sales training? Now, we don't really go over a lot of email training in the 8-Week Academy or other products. I might start adding that, but this is a call where we would go over something like that. So typically, just so everybody knows, we'll always have these calls every single Monday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's 8 Central, 7 Mountain, 6 Pacific. Just check your time zones if you're in other countries as well. Now, this call will always be recorded for you, and it will also be archived. So if you're not on here, or if you want to go back to the training because you need to take notes on it, you can actually go back into the members area, and it will actually be there. We usually will have that posted within about 24 hours. Usually the PDFs will probably come within a day or two after that. So we'll have PDFs on here. I do want you to take notes because it will help you soak up the information that we'll go through. But I also want you to go through the PDFs because you're going to learn a lot from the PDFs, okay? Now, typically, this training call will go about 45 minutes. We usually do about 40 to 45 minutes worth of content training, and then we'll open up the line for probably about 20 to 30 minutes, or sometimes we might have a call where we have a 45-minute Q&A, depending on how many people are actually listening to the live version and how many questions we have. Typically, I'm not going to cut you off if I've still got people asking me questions. Now, once we get to, 10,000 people on these weekly calls, we'll probably have, it might go to a 2-hour training call. I'll just kind of adjust it there where we have an hour of content training and an hour of Q&A depending on what we need. Okay, I'm always subject to be able to change that to make sure it's a better experience for you as the member. Now, for some of you on here, I've noticed that you've already purchased some of the core products of 7-Figure Sales Training. A lot of you have gone through the 8-Week Academy. A lot of you have gone through the 5 Principles of 7-Figure Sales Training, closing questions, some other trainings I have. I have noticed there are probably about 10 to 15% of you on here that have not purchased one of the 7-Figure Sales Training products, and that's fine. So a lot of the training you're going to get is going to be like completely brand new for you, and that's totally fine. It's just going to take you a little bit longer to maybe comprehend and understand it because you haven't gone through any of the other training. Now, for some of you who have actually purchased products, you will here and there, especially tonight, because I know there are some brand new people on here who have not gone through any of the training yet. So sometimes you'll hear training that you might have heard before. You might have heard me on a training webinar. You might have heard me in the 8-Week Academy go through a little bit. So sometimes some of this is going to be a reminder for you, but we will go through some new content typically towards the end of the training, and we will also go through a lot of different Q&A because there's going to be different Q&A sessions that people ask that totally open up your mind to like, okay, this is how I can apply it for my situation. If you have an objection that you're like, you know what, how would Jeremy answer that? That's why we have that weekly call, so you can ask me and I can help you right on the call. So let's go and get started. Just so everybody knows, and I know, like I said, a lot of you, probably 85 to 90% of you on here right now know who I am, know my background, been on several webinars. Most of you already have a lot of the products, so me introducing myself right now is maybe going to be kind of boring for you because you've already heard all this. For the new people on here that have not got any products, you just enrolled for the weekly training calls, I'm going to give you a brief introduction. So my name is Jeremy Miner. I live here in the St. Louis, Missouri area. If you look me up, you can even Google me. There's some Google stuff out there, but I'm actually ranked as a sales professional. This is before I started seven-figure sales training, but as a sales professional, sales job, just like all of you probably have, I was actually ranked as far as income as in the top 1%. How does it go? The top 1% of the top 1% of all salespeople in the entire world selling anything. Okay, that's according to Direct Sales Magazine. There were several different publications that you can look me up on that. In my industry that I came from before I got into sales training, there's several industries. I started in 2000 as a door-to-door salesperson selling security systems while I was going through college. So I'm in my 30s now. And the last industry that I came out of was network marketing and also the coaching industry, where I would sell very high-end coaching packages to just business owners, to anybody really. So as a direct sales professional, I am ranked number 44th in the entire world out of over 108 million salespeople in the direct sales industry. At that time, as a sales professional in my sales career, as a an employee basically. A lot of people don't believe that. They're like, were you a business owner? No, I was an employee. Unfortunately, I was working for somebody else. But as a salesperson, I was actually averaging over $2.4 million a year as a salesperson. $2.4 million a year. Now, here's the reason why I say that. When I first started learning how to communicate and sell, I would go out, I would find sales trainers and salespeople to train me, and I would pay them. And I started getting smarter as time went along, and I asked them, well, how much did you make as a salesperson? One guy that started training me sold cars, and he said, I'm a top car salesman. I'm going to train you how to sell anything. Doesn't matter. And I started getting smart, and I said, well, how much did you make selling cars? And he said, well, I made about $200,000 a year. And I was like, okay, that's really good. But as I started learning how to communicate and sell, I came to the realization that that person really could never teach me how to make more than that, right? Like if he only made $200,000 a year, how could he teach me how to make $300,000 a year or $500,000 a year? How could he teach me how to make over $1 million a year as a sales professional? So the reason why I bring up the income is because I've been to those levels of multi-seven figures. Statistically, there's only been 3 other sales trainers in the entire history, supposedly, of starting, sales training companies that you've probably heard of, the gurus that actually even made over 7 figures a year when they were a sales professional. Not as a sales trainer selling their books and DVDs and audios, their training, but actually as a salesperson in a sales job. There's only 2 other people. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump into this. That's kind of a quick intro so you know who I actually am. Like I said, if you've been on the training before, you've already heard that, so don't get too bored. If you're brand new, now you know. So what we want to start off with today, and like I mentioned a minute ago, if you've been through the products, you've probably heard some of this, so it's going to be a reminder for you. If you're brand new, you have not gone through any products, there's going to be something that's going to hit you sometimes like a ton of bricks. And sometimes I'm very blunt with this. But let's talk about, first of all, because we really have to get to an understanding of where are we in the world of selling today. So where are we as sales professionals? So I always have to ask that question when I'm at an event, and I say, I always ask people in attendance is, does the consumer of our time, so here we are 2016, do they buy the same way? Do they think the same way? Do they have the same buying behaviors that consumers did, let's say, 5 years ago or 10 years ago, or let's say even 20 years ago back in the 1990s, or 30 years ago back in the 1980s? Do they have the same buying behaviors as they did 20, 30, even 10 years ago? Now, when I ask that question, 99% of the people in the audience raise their hands and say, no, consumers buy completely different, and most people say even than they did 10 years ago back in 2005 and 2006. So then I ask, why has that changed? Why has the consumer changed? And it's very simple if you really think about it logically. 20-plus years ago, what was the bridge between the company and the consumer? Well, it was, of course, you. the salesperson, right? The company would do what? They would send out the salesperson to educate the public about the products and services that they sold. And that was pretty much the way the consumer learned about a company, unless it was on like a radio ad or, maybe a TV infomercial or a TV commercial. That was really the only way they learned about the company, was you, the salesperson, right? But here in our time, as you all know, with the power of technology, the internet access we have, the social media especially, holy cow, we're in a completely different era. It's like we're in the twilight zone now. So the consumer, I have to tell you this, knows all about your company. They know all about your products. They know all about your services. They know about your pricing. They know who your competitors are. And they know how long you've been in business simply by just doing a quick search on Google, or, they can do that on their phone now, for heaven's sake. They go to their computer and phone, just type in information, and boom, it's right there. So because of this power that the consumer has, right, this knowledge base, they no longer will be pressured by pushy salespeople because they know they have many other choices to choose the exact product or service that you're selling to them. So whatever you sell right now, just so you know, your consumers, even if you approach them cold and they've never heard about your company, within minutes can find out everything they need to know about your competitors, and they know they don't have to be pressured because they have other choices to buy exactly what you sell. Very, very, very few salespeople have something that no one else has. I mean, less than probably 0.5%. So let me give you an example of what I mean by this. Let's say that, I always say this in the trainings, especially but on my webinars. Let's take a look at used cars. So think about it yourself if you're a car salesman, right? So in the United States today, and it's really everywhere, a customer, a potential customer of, let's say, really any type of car, let's just, Toyota Camry, for example, they can really arm themselves with all manner of information before they even get on your car dealership, right? I mean, they can go to the internet, they can find out other dealerships who are offering the same car, and they can find out where those dealerships are at, which gives them a much wider range of choices, right? They then can get on their social media, right, or they can visit websites to discover what each dealer's reputation is and whether their customers that have bought from them previously were actually happy with that dealership, right? They can also visit online forums to see what other car owners felt about the car, right? They can go to Kelley Blue Book or Auto Trader to find out the price that those used cars are selling for. And let's say once they find a car they actually like, what else they can do? They can take the VIN number and with a quick online search find out whether it's been an accident or had any major repairs done. So for the most part, the consumer of our time is protected from unethical salespeople, right? But if she gets any, I always say dirty dealing, or she gets, pissed off at you or feels pressured, she can do a lot more than simply get mad at you or go, tell a neighbor or friend. She can post that on her Facebook to all of her Facebook friends. She can put it on Twitter. She can put it on the readers of her blog. Many of them who will share their post with their social media friends, completely undermining the seller's ability to actually sell their product or service. Now, I want you to think and extend the realities of used cars to really what you're selling, really to anything that's ever been sold, okay? Now, I want to bring something up for you. And I actually talk about this in a lot of events that I do. So there's a great book. So if you want to learn a lot about how selling has changed, there's a great book called To Sell is Human. It's by Daniel Pink. It's To Sell is to Human. It's by Daniel Pink, great author. And on that book, you can actually go into that book, and he does a test group study. There was probably like 100 people, I think, in this test group, if I remember. I read this book, a few years back. And he asked the test group this question, and I want you to think about this question in your mind. Okay, so just think like I'm asking you right now. When you think of sales or selling, so when you think of sales or selling, what is the first word that pops into your mind? So when you think of sales or selling, what is the first word that pops into your mind? What is the first word? Now, here's what the results of that survey came back, okay? The first word that came into most people's minds from the survey was the word pushy, was the word yuck, was the word sleazy, was the word dishonest, was the word hard, was the word ick, was the word difficult, was the word dishonest, was the word challenging, and was the word hard. Those were the top words that came from that survey. I want you to imagine that for just a second, okay? So pushy, let's go back to that, was the number one word mentioned or adjective that the respondents picked, okay? And the good thing about adjectives, they reveal people's attitudes since they often contain a very emotional component that nouns really don't have, right, if you took English classes. So as you can see, the emotions from the words sales and selling carry an undeniable flavor, right? Of those words, about 9 out of 10 of them were completely negative, okay? Now, if you reflected their discomfort, people's discomfort with selling, such as tough, hard, painful, and difficult, but most of the words reflected their distaste for salespeople, like pushy, yuck. There were other words like slimy, sleazy, dishonest, fake, and the favorite, manipulative, okay? So as you can see, selling makes many of us feel uncomfortable, and it makes us feel disgusted, right? Well, most of it has to, why is that though? So most of it has to do with the way we communicate or think we have to communicate, okay? And I call that traditional selling techniques. Call it the old model of selling. It's taught by what I call the old sales gurus that really consumers in our time, for the most part, run the other way from when it's used on them. Imagine yourself when a pushy salesperson starts to sell to you. You do what? You typically run the other way, right? So the second question, let's go over this real quick. And like I said, we're going to go over a lot about how selling has changed right now. We're then going to go over really what that means. We're going to go over like 3 different types of communication modes. We're going to talk about the highest persuasion, and then I'm going to give you a very unique tool here in about 20 minutes or so that you can use to immediately connect with your prospects that will really attract them to you like a magnet. And then we'll open up the line for questions. I know a lot of you have questions about the material. Now, here is the second part of that survey, okay? So the second question, and I'm going to ask you this question. Here's what he asked the test group in this book. And like I said, I'm going to ask you now. I want you to think of it yourself. When you think of sales or selling, what's the first picture that comes to your mind? So not the first word that comes to your mind, but when you think of sales or selling, what's the first picture that comes to your mind? Think about that. What's the first picture that comes to your mind when you think of sales or selling? Now, according to the test group, by a very wide margin was the word car salesman, then man in a suit, then used car salesman, and the most troubling one again was pushy. Okay? Now, a lot of the respondents in the test group also used the word shark, the term shark, and they also used the adjectives again, slick, annoying, aggressive, and sleazy. So I want you to understand, it's important for us to understand how people view you as a sales professional, because once you understand how they view you, then you can learn how to get them to view you completely different. So instead of them viewing you as the dreaded, stereotypical used car salesman trying to stuff your solution down their throat, what we do through these training calls and through the 7-figure sales training materials, we teach you how to be viewed in their eyes as what I call the trusted authority or a trusted advisor, rather than just another salesperson trying to sell them something. Once they view you as the trusted authority, you are a completely different level in their eyes, and they actually respect you and want to do business with you over anyone else. They view everybody else as just somebody trying to sell them something, whereas you are there as their trusted advisor, the authority in your entire industry, and why would they ever want to do business with anyone else? They wouldn't, right? So you have to understand that these beliefs about you, the salesperson, are embedded in pretty much every prospect that you talk to about what you sell. And that is that sales is distasteful because it's deceitful, okay? So I want you to understand this is what you're going up against every single day, every single week, every month of the year. So for better or worse, consumers now view you, the salesperson, much like the prototypical used car salesman, right? So whether you're talking about your products or your services or your company or anything, Most consumers think that you have an ulterior motive. Okay, you've got your own agenda. You're out there just trying to make the sale. You're just promising them things that you can't deliver, right? And sometimes you're just out there, using stats in your presentations, cherry-picking those stats to try to prove your point on why they should actually buy from you. It's like when we look at the news and we see the unemployment rate by the government, we're just like, yeah, they're just cherry-picking stats to try to make us feel better, right? It's the same thing that people now view you as a salesperson think. So my question that I always ask people on my training webinars, or if I'm training them live, is, does the salesperson in our time? So if selling has changed, if the consumer buying habits have completely changed, the consumer has changed, we have to ask ourselves as salespeople, have we changed? Have we caught up with that? Or are we still selling the same way the salespeople did in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, even 10 years ago? Do we use those same sales techniques? Okay? And I'm going to ask you some questions here, and I just want you to think about it. Do you use some of the following sales techniques? Have you been taught to assume the sale? I know I was. When I first got into sales in 2000, my sales manager slapped me some sales material and always said, you got to assume the sale all the time. You just got to push until they buy. So I know I was taught it. I'm assuming all of you have been taught that. Were you also taught what's called the ABCs of closing? That stands for always be closing. I know I was taught that by traditional sales gurus. Were you taught when you were trying to overcome somebody's objection, I know how you feel, others have felt the same way, this is what they found? Were you taught that? I know I was when I was in traditional sales training, right? Now, were you also taught how to ask what I call manipulative questions to get them to say yes several times in your presentation? Were you taught that? I know I was. Most of you would probably say yes. Were you taught to be relentless, that you had to accept rejection as a normal part of selling, that you had to chase a sale, that you have to be excited about your products and solutions, and you have to show that enthusiasm to them, because if you show them that you're really excited about what you're selling, that they're just going to be excited as well and want to buy? Have you ever been taught that? Or have you ever been taught this? Here's my favorite one. This almost makes me laugh, and we'll probably have some training on this in the next couple of weeks. But have you ever been taught what I call one of the biggest lies in selling, one of the biggest sales myths? That's a numbers game. So selling is a numbers game. You got to get to as many no's as you can to get to a yes. Have you been taught that? Okay. Now, let's give you an example here. Okay, and I don't. When I give you these examples, I want you to understand. I respect these people that I give you examples of. I just know in their literature, because I've probably read a good 500 books on selling. I've probably went to every single sales training event there's ever been known to the history of man. Me learning the skills I'm teaching you, I probably spent close to $150,000 for over the last 15 years. Okay, so a crazy survey just came out. This was a couple of years ago, and I'm going to read it to you. So in North America right now, and I'm assuming this survey applies for anywhere in the world, but in North America right now, 82% of salespeople, so that means 8 out of 10 of you on this call, do not feel comfortable using traditional selling techniques. 82% of you. And they especially do not feel comfortable with them being used on them. Okay? Why is that? Well, it's because they go against everything we know about building successful relationships. Think about it. If all you did, let's say you're a single guy or gal and you're at a bar or wherever you're at, and you see somebody you like and you go up and talk to them, and all you do is talk about how great you are and about all the good things that you have to offer them, and you do this and you do this, and you talk about yourself really the whole time, and you're only sitting there focused on your agenda and how good you are and you're the best at this and you're best at that. You really don't listen to them, and at the end you try to pressure them and giving you your phone number, going on a date with them. How do you think that person is going to react to you? Well, they're, of course, going to give you pushback, right? They're going to give you sales resistance, because that's really what it is. They're going to give resistance, and they're probably not going to go on a date with you, okay? So it's really easy to understand that way. So my question is, why do salespeople still sell like it's in the 1960s or 70s, 80s, or 90s, even though the consumer is completely different? And it's actually pretty easy to understand this once you kind of hear what I'm about to say. So let me ask you, what is the age of the average sales training guru that you buy your books and audio CDs from? What is that age? Now, typically when I ask an audience that, most of them raise their hands, and without hesitancy, they say 60s, 70s, 80s. A lot of them say, the sales training I've learned, that person's already passed away. Some of them might say 50s, but it's usually 60s, 70s, 80s, 90% of the time. Sometimes there'll be a few there that will say in their 50s, okay? Now, I want to be very clear with you, okay? If you've heard of the sales training gurus, if you've heard of these men, I don't have anything against any of those people. I've probably read their material. I'm sure they're very good people. I'm just pointing out that these sales trainers still use what I call the old model of selling to teach you actually how to sell and communicate. So this is really easy to understand. What generation did these men learn how to sell in? When did they learn how to sell? They're in their 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, or they've passed away. Well, these men learned how to sell and when? Probably the 1960s, 1970s, maybe the 1980s. If we're lucky, maybe the early 90s. But the consumer was completely different then. Yet they're still teaching you how to sell like it's in the 70s, 80s, or 90s. Now, let me give you an example of one of these old gurus, okay? And like I said, I don't want to take anything away from this person I'm about to go over. I respect this person. I'm sure he's a great, amazing person. I'm just pointing out he is still teaching the old model of selling that was primarily taught back in the 60s and 1970s, maybe 80s. Okay, this person, Joe Girard. Have you ever heard of Joe Girard? Think in your mind. I've read probably about 6 or 7 of his books, I think, now, and I've read these probably about 10 or 15 years ago. So in his book, and I'm going to quote a few things, in his book, How to Sell Anything to Anybody, he says in that book that he is the greatest salesperson in the world. Okay? And he actually, I looked it up, he holds the Guinness Book of World Records for the most cars sold in a year, which is a huge feat. But this was all the way back in 1963. So let me give you an example of one of Girard's sales techniques from the 1960s. And I'm just quoting from his book right now. He says in his books, if the prospects mentioned that they have been on vacation somewhere, then I'm going to tell them I went to that exact place too. Because wherever that guy's been, I'm going to tell them I've been there as well, even if I've never heard of the place. This is what he writes in his book. He also says they think they know a lot about me because they think I know a lot about them. If they say they've been to Yellowstone National Park, I'm going to say that I've been to Yellowstone National Park. If they say they fish for, salmon in Michigan, then I'm going to tell them I've fished in Michigan for salmon too. If they tell me they've got a relative that lives near the local Air Force base, I'm going to tell them I've got a relative that lives by that Air Force base. So basically, he's teaching you how to lie, right? This is a technique that he is still out there teaching from the 1960s. Now, I'm going to give you a few things here. So let's talk about, in his book, he also talks about one of his favorite cold calling techniques. Now, if you've been through my 8-week academy, you've probably heard this before, so this is going to be a refresher for you. If you've not been through the 8-week academy, this will probably be something new for you. So here's what he says in his book about cold calling. So it begins by choosing a random name in the phone book and then calling that person. And I'm just quoting you from his book. He says, now a woman answers the phone. Hello, Mrs. Kolowski. This is Joe Girard at Metropolis Chevrolet. I just wanted to let you know the car you ordered is ready, I tell her. Then he says, now remember, this is a cold call, and all I know for sure from the phone book is this person's name, address, and phone number. Now, Mrs. Kolowski doesn't know what I'm talking about. And she says, well, I'm afraid you have the wrong number. We haven't ordered a new car, she tells me. Joe says, are you sure? She says, well, I'm pretty sure. My husband would have told me, she says. And then Joe says, well, just a minute, I say. Is this the home of Clarence J. Kolowski? Then she says, no, my husband's name is Stephen. Then Joe says, well, gee, Mrs. Kolowski, I'm very sorry to disturb you at this hour of the day. I'm sure you're very busy. Now, Girard doesn't just hang up the phone at this point. He keeps talking to her so he can bait the hook. And he says, Mrs. Kolowski, you don't happen to be in the market for a new car, do you? If she knows they are, she'll probably say yes, but the typical answer will be, no, I don't think so. You'll have to ask my husband. And there it is, Joe says. Here's what I'm looking for. Oh, well, when can I reach your husband? And she'll say, well, he's usually home by 6. Joe says, okay, I got what I wanted. Well, fine, Mrs. Klowski, I'll call you back then if you're sure I won't be interrupting supper. I wait for her to tell me they don't eat until about 6:30, and then I thank her. Now, from this point, Gerard moves into what he does when he calls Mr. Klowski in his book. Okay, so let's go over this real quick. And I actually wrote down some notes on this. I want to make sure that I'm sticking to this for you guys so you completely understand this, okay? So at this point, here's what he does when he calls back the husband, Mr. Klowski. He says, quote, you know what I'm going to be doing about 6 o'clock? That's right. I'm calling Mr. Klowski. He says, hello, Mr. Klowski. This is Joe Gerard at Metropolis Chevrolet. I spoke to your wife this morning, and she suggested I call you back at this time. I was wondering if you're in the market for a new Chevrolet. Mr. Klowski says, no, not just yet. So I ask him, well, when do you think you might start looking at a new car? I ask that question straight out, and he's going to think about it and give me an answer. Maybe he only wants to get rid of me. But whatever the reason he says, he's probably going to be something what he really means. And it's easier than trying to dream up a lie. So he says, well, I guess I'll be needing one in about 6 months, he says. And then I finish with, well, fine, Mr. Klowski, I'll be getting in touch with you then. Oh, by the way, what are you driving now? He tells me what he drives, I thank him, and I hang up. Gerard then files as a name, along with a reminder in his calendar to call him back in 6 months, and he moves to the next name on the list. Now, I want to ask you, and I want you to be, real with yourself. Do you think using these type of sales techniques, because that's really what they are, have caused consumers not to trust salespeople and look at you in a negative way, throw out objections, and reject what you're offering? And then typically what happens? Salespeople do what? They get lowered self-esteem, they have a lack of confidence, and many salespeople quit. That is why there is such a high turnover rate in sales, because of the way salespeople are taught how to communicate. And the interesting thing is to me, and this just blows my mind, that Joe Gerard, back in the 60s, found this many clueless people to become the world's greatest car salesman, and that he's still out there now teaching salespeople these techniques. It actually might seem to validate that this type of selling still works in 2016. But I'm going to tell you, there's one thing you might want to know about Joe Gerard, the world's greatest salesperson. He hasn't actually sold a car since 1977. You see, he quit the car business about 40 years ago to teach others like you how to sell. Now, Gerard's techniques might have worked back in the mid-1970s, but in our time, let's be real, they've got the whiff of old boxes forgotten in the attic, right? Because I want you to think about it. In our time and day, 2016, well, Mrs. Klowski's not at home. She would be where? She's probably at work. Her household now has caller ID to prevent salespeople to intrude on her family, right? Because she's getting sales calls every day from telemarketers. So they, of course, have caller ID and don't answer if they don't know what the phone number is. And if a salesperson did get through the family's defenses, she would probably get rid of them very quickly, maybe even Google his name afterward and post to her Facebook followers about the creepy call from the salesperson she got that night, right? But more broadly, Joe's worldview, and many like him, these selling techniques resemble one of those old movies, you know what I mean, in which the soldier who's stuck on a remote island continues fighting because he hasn't got the word the war has actually ended. So my question is, what's the proof of this training? Because I always want to look at facts, okay? What are the results of all this old traditional sales training that's been out there for 20, 30, 40, 50 years, okay? According to Payscale.com, you've heard me say this before if you've been through some of my training, the average salesperson in North America makes $42,340.50 a year. Let me ask you, did you get involved in the sales profession to only make $42,000 a year? So the question has to be is, do these techniques, the traditional selling, actually work very effectively anymore in what many experts are calling the new economy or the new world of selling? Okay? Now, let's real quickly, we're going to go over 3 different communication modes because I'm going to give you the highest form of persuasion, and then like I said, I'm going to give you a very unique tool you guys can use tonight to help you make your potential customers attracted to you like a magnet, okay? Now, like I said, this first 1 or 2 training calls this week and next week. We're going to go over more psychology-based information before we get into very, very specifics, but I will make sure even today and next week, by going through a lot of the psychology and having the right mindset of learning what I call the new model of selling, we actually get into some content of specific examples of what questions to ask, when to ask those, and how to actually do those, okay? And then after probably week 3, it's pretty much all going to be content from that point on. Okay. Now, let me ask you a few questions here. And I want you to be honest with yourself, okay? Because unless we are real with ourselves, unless we are honest with where our communication skills are, it's very hard to get to the next level. And I have to tell you, when I got into sales back in 2000, within a couple of years, I was making around $250,000 a year. And I thought I was all that, and I was like this top guy because I was the top guy in my company, right? So I thought I didn't have to learn anymore. But the issue is with that is I just kept at the same level. And because I kept selling that way, traditional selling techniques, I never advanced until I really started to grasp what I call the new model of selling, which we're going to start training you on these weekly calls, and it's all over in the sales training products like many of you have actually purchased, okay? So until I was real with myself and like, look, what I'm doing right now is only getting me $250,000 a year in sales income. So if I keep doing that, I'm never going to improve, right? Like I'm already working 12 hours a day. Am I going to work 16 hours a day and never see my kids or my family? Of course not. So unless I change the way I communicate, nothing is going to change for me. So I want you to be real in that sense. So the first question I have to ask is, how effective are you at communicating? Scale of 1 to 10. If you could rate yourself right now, how effective are you? Scale of 1, not very effective, 5, average, 10, you're in the top 1% of your industry. Okay, so think about that in your mind. Now, do one of the following happen to you? Number 1, do you feel the discomfort of rejection when people respond negatively to you when you're talking to them about your solution? So do you feel the discomfort of rejection when that happens? Many of you probably do. I ask that question all the time at my seminars. Now, in the process of talking to your prospects about your products or services, do you sometimes get frustrated because you don't feel like you're getting your point across, right? And then because you can't get your point across, you stop calling leads, you stop cold calling, or you stop, going out there to find new business. Does that ever happen to you? Now, the third question, when you finally find someone who's interested in your product or service, right? The old saying is every blind squirrel eventually finds a nut, So once that happens, do you sometimes feel uncomfortable at receiving the money as a reward for your efforts? Has that ever happened? So my question, why? Why is this? Okay, I will tell you, most of it has to do with the way you communicate, or you've been taught how to communicate, okay? Telling and persuading tend to be very self-focused, and it does not connect with most salespeople. 82%, remember the survey? And most salespeople resist doing it, and then what happens to our sales career? Most salespeople get discouraged. They lose self-esteem. Many of them end up quitting and going into HR or operations or other functions because they say what? I just wasn't cut out for selling. Right? Well, the issue is that they weren't just cut out for selling. They just didn't know how to communicate, okay? They're using traditional sales techniques that made them feel uncomfortable, and they didn't want to use them because of that uncomfortable feeling. Now, I want all of you to know, and like I said, you've heard this on some of my products if you've gone through some of my courses before, but I'm going to bring this up especially for the new people on this call. Behavioral science, and I studied a lot of behavioral science when I was actually in college, but behavioral science has actually proven now that in communicating with others, we are, number 1, there's 3 modes. The number 1 mode, we are actually the least persuasive. So write this down. We're the least persuasive when we tell prospects things about our products or services, meaning our features and benefits, or we attempt to posture and dominate them. Present, tell our story, give a sales pitch, put pressure on them, or trying to assume the sale. According to behavioral science, that is the least persuasive way to sell, which is stunning because 99.9% of sales training out there teaches you how to do those things, right? Number 2, you're more persuasive when we interact and try to discover from each other. That's like a discussion or a debate. But number 3, we're the most persuasive when we allow others to persuade themselves. That's called dialogue. So my question for you is, which one of those three categories have you been taught how to sell? Now, when I ask that to an audience, I don't think I've ever had a person raise their hand and say number 3, dialogue. They'd only raise their hand if I've taught them that, okay? 99.9% say number 1, right? So the sales training that you keep learning has been proved by behavioral science to be the least persuasive way to sell. And that never made any sense to me when I was learning traditional selling techniques, okay? So traditional selling, telling your story, trying to have posture with your prospects, acting tough, trying to persuade them through your presentations, telling your prospective clients they should do business with you because you're the best at this, the best at that, yada, 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 has been proven to be the least persuasive way to sell. Now, I will tell you, traditional selling, which what I call the old model of selling, does contain some elements of asking questions, okay, to find out their needs. But I will tell you, 99% of salespeople do not ask the right questions at the right time in their sales conversations. They ask what I call surface questions, okay, which only get them the surface answers, okay? And most salespeople do not listen for the right things, and they're way too anxious about getting their solution, I call pitching their solution, as quickly as they can. So as soon as they see a moment, like after 5 minutes, they're just pitching their features and benefits and advantages of going with them. They just jump right into it, sales pitch, right? So in other words, the focus is primarily on the need for you, the salesperson, to sell your solution before you ever find out if your prospect even has problems, right? And what actually caused those problems. And most importantly, how those problems are affecting them, and do they have a desire to actually change that, okay? So one of two things will actually happen to you when you try to present your solution too early in the conversation. Write this down. Number 1, this happens a lot, and let me know if it's happened to you. Just, think in your mind. Number 1, if you present your solution too early in the conversation, you're going to notice that your prospect will withdraw from you, okay? Meaning they don't return your calls, they don't respond to your emails or text, and they don't call you back from the voicemails you left. Has that ever happened to anybody on this call? Or number 2, and it could be a combination of this, they get defensive, they throw out objections, and they reject and try to get rid of you very quickly. Has that ever happened to you? One of those two things, okay? Now, so real quickly, I want to, before we dive into this, I want to talk a little bit more about what dialogue actually is, okay? So just real quickly here, let's talk about what dialogue actually is. And I want you to write some of these notes down. Okay, like I said, we will have PDFs on this, so if you're not a fast note taker, don't worry, it is recorded. So what is dialogue? Let me give you the textbook definition. Dialogue is a way of communicating that's very open. Okay, open between you and your prospect. And it allows you to get the answers that you need to find out really, what a lot of people call the core essence of who your prospect is, but more importantly, what their problems are, if any, because maybe they don't have problems. You have to be willing to understand some of your prospects might not have problems, okay? Finding out what's caused those problems, and more importantly, how it's affecting them and whether or not you can actually help them. Okay. Now, when you learn how to have effective dialogue, which you're going to learn on these weekly training calls, and you're also going to learn it through the 8-Week Academy and other products you might have purchased, you compel your prospects to listen to 100% of what you're saying and offering. Okay. So the 5 principles of 7-figure selling, which many of you have: asking skilled questions, listening for the answers, giving feedback, committing, and eliminating sales pressure are the foundation of dialogue. They are the backbone of it. If any of you have ever heard of a gentleman by the name of Tom Peters, I read several of his books, and one of his books, I can't remember, I wrote it down in notes here, but he said, my job is not to sell products. My job is to solve problems. Okay? Solve problems. But I'm going to tell you, dialogue requires you to do something that 99.9% of salespeople never do, and that's to learn how to detach yourselves from the expectations of actually making that sale, and instead you're going to start focusing on whether or not you can actually help them. whether or not there is actually a sale to be made in the first place there, because there might not be, right? So when you detach yourself from your agenda of making the sale, you become more open to who? You become more open to your prospect, right? Open to hearing them, open to feeling and understand where they're coming from, what their needs are, what their concerns are. And your potential customer will start to treat you differently than they've ever treated any salesperson before. They will respect you. They'll start to view you as the trusted authority in your entire market, and you'll never have to worry about competitors taking your prospects away again. You will never have any competition at that point because they view all of their salespeople as just another salesperson trying to sell them something. So the focus is off of you. It's on your prospect. You're focusing on their world. You're focusing on their world, their needs, and not your world, not your agenda of wanting to make a sale. And both of you will feel the power of being able to help each other, okay? So I want you to remember this, and this is something you can take to the bank. When you focus on you and your own agenda of making the sale, you will always increase your anxiety, and you'll always increase your prospect's anxiety, which makes it 10 times worse. But when you focus on them and their world and what they're looking for, you have zero anxiety. And more importantly, they have no anxiety. That is the power of what you're going to learn is the new model of selling. Now, I'm going to give you a quick tool here for the next 10 minutes or so, and then we're going to open up the lines for Q&A. So I want you to write this down. So I'm going to give you access to a very powerful and flexible tool that you can use in a variety of situations to connect with your potential customers immediately. It's what I call, there's two things it's called. A lot of people call it your 30-second commercial, which I've called it that before, but I also call it your personalized intro. So it's basically like an introduction, but it's more personalized to that person's problems, okay? Now, for example, let's take a look real quick about what an average salesperson does when a prospect asks them, let's say a gatekeeper potential client asks you, what do you do? What does the average salesperson typically say? They answer with some generic response, well, I'm with XYZ company, and we do this, and we do that, and we do this. And then what usually happens? Well, they get rejected pretty quickly, right? So when you say that, what does that actually mean to the person you're talking to? What does that mean to your prospect? I would say it means very little. And if anything, it means that you just told them what you sell and what your solution is without ever finding out if they even have any problems in the first place. And remember what happens when you present your solution too early in the conversations. And we're going to train a lot more on that, specific examples in the training, but just to give you kind of a more broad view. So typically what happens when you present your solution too early? They say, well, we've already got that. Or can you call me back next week? Or, you know what, can you email me some information? Or, I'm not really interested in that. We already have a company that does that. Or, I've got to talk to my boss about this, or I've got to talk to my spouse. Does that sound familiar? So this is what the 7-figure salesperson, how they would handle that type of question, okay? So the 7-figure salesperson, okay, the top 1% of all salespeople know that the way to attract your prospect to you like a magnet, okay, is not to tell them here, let's do it this way. So the way that you can attract them to you, and I always call it, I use that magnet analogy, is not to tell them what you do, but tell them how what you do helps other people. So let me repeat that. So it's not to tell them what you do, because that means very little to most people, or you sound just the same as every other salesperson. But you want to tell them how what you do helps other people. So you're going to tell them how what you do helps other people. Write that down. So let me give you a few examples from a couple of different industries. And we have salespeople and members of the community that are in hundreds of different industries, if not thousands at this point. So I'm just going to give you a few examples. Let's say that you're in direct sales, or you sell like network marketing, or you sell like businesses online or franchises, those type of things. So basically in your industry, as an example, you sell products and you recruit people into your organization. So here's an example what to say when somebody says, well, what do you do? Here's what you would say. First of all, you're going to list 2 or 3 generic problems that people in that industry or prospects would be familiar with. So 2 to 3 problems that they would be like, oh yeah, I see what you do, because they know that either they have those problems or they know people who have those problems, right? So people in the industry have those problems. More than likely they have them too. So you would say, let's say, like I said, if you sold network marketing or businesses online, we're going to use that as an example. Whatever you sell, just plug in the terminology, the wording here, and I'll show you how to do that in a second, the formula. So you're going to say something like this. Well, certainly, John, I'd be happy to go through that. And you know how a lot of people nowadays are finding it harder to get by with, the corporate downsizing, the lack of job security, the higher cost of living. Well, what I do is I help people like that set up their own full or part-time businesses out of their home so they can start taking care of themselves and their families again, then to get them, more financial income. But tell me, what do you do for a living? See how that works? Now, let's say, for example, in this example, you're a financial advisor, okay, and you sell financial services, okay? Now, let's say in this example as well, let's take it up to even a more specific notch. Let's say that you sell to institutions, okay? So you're a financial planner. Most of your clients are institutions, because I'm actually training some salespeople in this right now, that invest millions, sometimes billions of dollars with different firms, okay? And let's say that in your industry, sometimes investors are concerned with their investments because of all the volatility in the market, maybe the economic growth, those type of things. So you're going to list 2 or 3 problems that they would associate themselves with that they would know what you're talking about. So it would look something like this. Well, yeah, certainly. I mean, you know how a lot of, high net worth investors, maybe like you, are sometimes concerned with their investments because of all the volatility in the market, the stagnant economic growth, and sometimes even central banking policy. Well, what we do at XYZ Company is we have a proprietary investment blend that has a 3-year track record, or whatever it is, of paying our investors a very substantial return, but more importantly, at the same time, because of our structure, we're able to do that with minimal risk. Now, do you see how this paints a picture of how what you do helps other people, okay? So your response focuses on different challenges that they would identify with. They would know about that. They would know about they would be worried about central banking policy if they're a high net worth investor. They would worry about the volatility in the market. They would worry about the stagnant economic growth, right? So if a prospect identifies with that, and let's say that you're selling network marketing, for example, and they're finding it harder to get by, or they're facing downsizing, or they know someone who is, do you think they're going to want to know more about what you're doing? Okay? Or let's say in the investor example, do you think investors are concerned about the volatility of the market? Or do you think they're concerned about protecting their principal? You bet most of them actually would be, okay? So let me give you kind of the example or the mechanics of creating your own introduction, because a lot of you are not in those industries that we just gave examples of, okay? And if you have questions on this, we can work this out in the Q&A. So it's comprised of 3 parts: problem, solution, question. So here's how it looks. You're going to start your reply with, you know how. So that's going to be the first 3 words out of your mouth, you know how. Then you're going to add 2 to 3 generic problems that they would identify with, problems that what you sell, your solution, will actually solve for them. Okay, problems that they would understand. Okay? Now, I don't want you to put in more than 3. It gets too much if you're doing 4, 5, or 6. Keep it 2 to 3. Okay? Now, realize this, and we'll talk about this more in other trainings because we're running out of time for this Q&A. The 7-figure salesperson, we look at ourselves as what? We look at ourselves as problem finders and problem solvers, not product pushers who are just out there trying to sell a product, okay? So your job is to discover what that person's problems are, to find those problems. Because I will tell you, 80% of your prospects sometimes don't even know they have problems. And your questions are the one that help them find out they do, okay? So that is the key to the personalized introduction, okay? Now, solution is going to demonstrate how what you do helps them solve those challenges, okay? So the key here is you want to use very easy language that is not going to go over their head, okay? You've got to be generic there, okay? So here's how it flows. Well, what I do is, and then you're going to continue with how your solution solves those problems. okay? But I want you to keep it very short and very specific and tight. Now, I will tell you, sometimes it takes a while to really get your personalized introduction honed down. And I want you to write down 3 or 4 different types and just test those, and you're going to use the one that gets the better response. And I will help you with that on the Q&A, okay? So you're then going to ask a question to turn the focus back onto the other person to start uncovering what their problems are and, what's caused those, how it's affecting, etc., okay? So here's the formula. Well, you know how. You're going to list general problems for the industry. What I do is help people. You're going to solution, how what you do helps them solve those problems. And then you're going to ask, I'm curious, what do you, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so if you sold financial services, well, what do you currently invest in now? Or if you sold, let's say, health insurance, well, what type of insurance policy do you have now? Let's say if you sold cars, well, what type of car do you drive now? Or let's say that you sold, I don't even know, big screen TVs. Well, what type of TV do you have now? Okay, so you have to find out their present situation and what they're using right now to try to solve those problems, okay? Those are called background questions. We will have other trainings where I give you specific background questions to ask and really how to use them, and we'll really tailor them to your industry in those in the Q&As for sure, okay? Now, let's open up real quick. We're going to open up the lines, and actually before we do that, I had several of you email me questions that I wanted to cover for you guys, and you might not be on this call. A few of you actually emailed me. Well, there's actually several of you, but I only have time to go over a few of these. A few of you said that you wouldn't be on the call, but you wanted a couple of these questions answered. So I'm going to pull up these questions real quick, and then, like I said, we'll spend 10 or 15 minutes. We'll open up the lines, and whatever people are on here live, we'll go through their questions. So this lady is from Australia. Her name is I think it's Steve Whitaker. And she says in her question, I sell roof restorations in Australia. Last week I got we don't have the finances for this. We need to go back and look to see if we have the finances. She got this like several times during the day. And I'm not sure if she knocks doors or if she calls leads or what she is. I have to be more specific with that. But either or, we'll go through this. She says, I suspected they either didn't trust me, were getting another quote, or were generally unsure whether they could afford the urgent roof restoration. She said I was respectful and didn't push. What would Jeremy have done? Okay? All right, so here's how I would answer that question very specifically. And this was without me knowing her industry. Okay, I have trained some people that sell roofing, but I don't know the ins and outs of that industry. But here's how I would answer that first, Steve. So if you're on this, Steve Whitaker, here's how I would do that. So first of all, when they say, well, Steve, we just don't know if we can afford this. We just need to really kind of access our finances here. Okay, we just don't know. We just don't think we have the finances for this. First of all, you want to say this. Okay, that's not a problem. That's not a problem. So you want to say that's not a problem very in the front there to really diffuse the sales pressure. You're just like, yeah, okay, that's not a problem. It just helps to diffuse it, because what do they feel like most salespeople are going to do when they say that? Well, they're going to get pushy, right? They're going to give some push. The salesperson is going to try to push him. Well, of course, you need to afford this, and this is going to help you, and blah, 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 blah. And so they're expecting the salesperson to do that. So you're going to do the exact opposite. You're going to say, that's not a problem. You're just going to agree with them. That's not a problem. Then you're going to ask a clarifying question, because you really need to understand what that means. So when somebody says, I don't have the finances for that, do you really know what that means? Most of the time, you're just going to assume, well, they may just not have the money for it. But maybe they don't have the money for it today. Maybe they have it in 4 days or a week. Maybe they don't have all the money up front, but they're more interested in a payment plan. You just really don't know unless you ask a clarifying question, right? So you would ask this clarifying question, Steve. You would say, when you say you don't have the finances for this, can you tell me what you mean exactly? So when you say you don't have the finances for this, what do you mean by that? Okay, they are then going to tell you, and you're going to sometimes ask more clarifying questions depending on their answers. We don't know what their answers were because, Steve's not on the call here, but we're going to answer them. Now, you would ask this question. So let's say the prospect's name is Alex. So Alex, tell me this. If you did have the money, if you did have the finances for this, would this work for you? So if you did have the financing, would this work for you? Now, I will tell you, if you've taken him through the right questions to ask at the right time, which if you've never gone through any of my products, I'm going to teach you that on these training calls. If you've gone through the products already, if you've gone through some of them, I'm going to teach you even more to that, or we're going to really shape it to your individual industry. So you would say, well, tell me, if you did have the finances for this, would this work for you? Now, most people at this point would say, yeah, I think it would. Now, you get a few people say, no, I don't think this is really what I'm looking for at all. You ask a few clarifying questions, and maybe they're just really not qualified for what you're offering, and you have to be willing to walk away. Okay? No need to chase somebody who really can't get the finances together. But you're going to find out if they can or not by asking the right questions I'm going to teach you here. So let's say they say, yeah, this would work for me. You're going to ask this clarifying question. Well, why do you feel like it would, though? And you're going to say it in that tone. Well, why do you feel like it would, though? So it's almost like you're kind of a negative reverse there, right? You're not being negative, but you're being, well, why do you feel like it is? Why do you feel like it is, though? It's almost like you're questioning them. And when you question somebody, they do what? Well, I like it because of this, this, and that. And they tell you, right? But more importantly, them telling you why they feel like the roofing that you're offering, because Steve sells roof services, putting in new roofs. More importantly, them telling you why they, feel like the roofing is a good option for them. More importantly, who are they telling that to? Well, they're telling themselves, right? And when your prospects start to tell themselves why they want what you're selling, do you think that's more persuasive than you telling them why they should want what you're selling? I think you know the answer to that by now. Of course, it's more persuasive when they tell themselves, right? And then you would say this, and this is in a very relaxed tone. You have to understand it's a very relaxed tone. We're not salesy. We're not pushy. We're not the excited salesperson, right? Because if we do that, people are going to do what? They're going to run the other way, or they're going to get defensive. So you're then going to ask them, well, I can appreciate that money might be an issue for you for what you told me. How do you think you can resolve that where you can find funding to replace your roof so you don't have, so you don't take the possible risk of water damage to your home? Let me repeat that, Steve, and see how powerful this is. And I don't even know your industry. This is off the top of my head here. Okay? Well, I can appreciate that money might be an issue for you. How do you think you can resolve that where you can find funding to replace your roof so you don't take the possible risk of having water damage to your home? Because that's why people get new roofs, right? Because if they have a leaky roof, what does that do to the inside of their home? Well, it causes a lot of other problems that would cost them thousands of dollars to replace that would lower the value of their home, right? Nobody wants to do that, of course. Now, when you ask them that question, a lot of times people will say, well, we could put it on a credit card or, they'll come up with different ways. Well, come to think of it, do you have a payment plan we could do? If you have a payment plan, you might offer that. Or they might come up with different ways. Well, I could put it on a credit card. I could get a loan from the bank, because, equity, we got a lot of equity in the house. We could take it out of that. They'll come up with ways, right? Now, if they don't come up with any ways, they're like, well, we just don't really know if we can afford it still. I'm not sure if I really have any ways. They kind of hem and haw. You would ask this question. Well, what other avenues do you have to find the finances to be able to repair your roof so you don't have the possible water damage in the future? So what other avenues do you have to find the funding or the finances to repair your roof so you don't take the risk of possible water damage in the future? Now, at this point, a lot of people will come up with ways. So they'll be like, well, we could do this, we could do that. If they still can't come up with ways at this point, this is where you can make suggestions. Well, if you're open to it, here's what a lot of other of our clients do. This may or may not help you, but they do this. They do it on credit cards. They do it through a 401k. They pull out equity of their home. What of those avenues do you have, if any? What of those avenues do you have, if any? Now, if they come back and say, we have none of those avenues, there's nothing we can do, then you do what? Well, you know what, I'm sorry I couldn't help you, but without the funding to be able to repair the roof, there's really nothing I can do to help you. Tell me, what would be the time frame of you getting funding together to be able to repair your roof? Now, sometimes they might say, well, it's going to take us a month, or it's going to take us a couple weeks, or it's going to take 6 months, or 3 years, or we're never going to have it. Now, depending on how your business is, or your sales job, maybe you call them back in a week if they say it's going to take them a week or 2 weeks or 4 weeks, and you have that connection, okay? If they're 6 months out or a year, here's my card. Nothing I can do to help you. You'll have to get back to me at that point to see if I can help you at that point. And you just move on to the next person. Do you see how that works? Okay? Now, let's go ahead and open up the lines for questions real quick. Let me make sure I know how to do this. Sometimes I'm horrible with technology, but let's see if I can do that real quick. If you've got a question on here, I want you to press *6. So *6 is going to unmute yourself. So press *6. I want you to come out here and ask me any questions that you have. So *6 to unmute your line. *6 real quick. *6 to unmute your line.
You there, Jeremy?
Who's got the first question for me?
Jeremy, you there?
Yeah, who's this?
Jeremy, this is Joseph Roberry. We talked a little bit on Facebook the other day.
Ah, that's right. I remember you. So you're asking me questions. Now, tell me your industry you're in. I think you sell, is it solar?
Yeah, I sell solar door-to-door.
Okay, you sell solar door-to-door. Okay.
I love the product. I love the company.
Okay.
It's like
what company do you work for?
Solar City.
Okay, Solar City. I've heard of them. I think I told you I have stock in Vivint. Maybe I should have bought some Solar City, huh?
Yeah, now's a good time to buy some stock for sure.
All right, man. So what's your question? How can I help you?
I'm loving the content. I'm trying to switch over to this way of doing it,
Okay.
and that's the problem that I'm having with. And I'm currently doing very well. Number one in the company. That's just become. I'm working my ass off, and so I'm trying to develop the pitch. Like 2 or 3 problems, and like what you do door to door. You're very successful door to door. I was curious, like what your pitch would be.
Okay. So first of all, can I make a suggestion?
I would love it.
Okay. I want you to get this word pitch completely out of the way you think.
Okay.
Because when I start, I'm coming from the same place you came from. When I started as a salesman, it was the summer of 2000. I started exactly like you're now, selling door to door. I sold alarm systems for Pinnacle Security, which later on I sold for a company called Vivint. Okay, before I got out of the industry in I think 2005. Okay, 2006. So I went and I thought the same thing back in those days. That's when I used traditional selling techniques. I did very well at it. I made back in 15 years ago, I was making $250,000 every summer selling 4 months out of the year. Okay, just one of the very best ever in that industry. But I will tell you, compared to what I know now, I didn't even know really how to sell. I was just out there winging it. Okay. So I want you, and I thought the same way, how do I get my pitch out? How do I just get into the door to assume the sale and close the deal, right? Because that's what you're taught as a door-to-door salesperson, right? So I want you to get this pitch thing just completely out of your mind. Like, never use that word again. Okay? So it's like, take it out of your mindset. Okay, your words are very powerful, right? So instead of your pitch, I want you to think of yourself more as a problem finder and a problem solver, because it's a whole new way of thinking. Now, real quick, Joseph, just so I kind of know a little bit more background to help you here. What products of mine do you actually have, and what have you gone through? Just so I know.
I did the 5 principles, the 8-week one, the 7 solutions, whatever questions, and
okay, so you've gone through a whole gamut of stuff. Okay, that's good. Yeah. Okay. Now, in week 3, you've gone through week 3 of the 8-week academy?
Yeah. Okay.
So in week 3, because I don't talk a lot about door-to-door selling, but it's pretty much a cold call, right? It's pretty much the same thing almost, except instead of calling someone on the phone, you're just knocking on the door, okay? So in week 3 on cold calling, I do want you to focus on some of that, but we're going to actually focus on it right now to make it a little bit more tighter for you, for your industry. That's why we do these weekly calls, is to really hone it into your industry that you're actually in, okay? So real quick, just so I kind of know what you're actually saying right now, can you give me like the first 30 seconds out of your mouth? Can you just kind of say, this is exactly what I say. Just like I'm your prospect, you're Joseph knocking on my door. What do you first say?
Yeah, knocking on the door. Hey, I'm not selling anything. Just coming from, I drop a neighbor, just coming from the Jones family. Want to give you a heads up what's going on. I'm not sure if you've seen the panels going up on the house or not. We don't sell solar panels. Basically, if we can get this house to qualify for the program like the Jones family did. It takes a couple of months to go through it. Sometimes it does work out. Sometimes it doesn't. If it does, like it did their family, they'll actually, pay for the entire thing and then just sell you the electricity. And that electricity costs less than if you were to get it from the utility. And that's all assuming it works out. We're not there yet. We'll take a look at it. First step is me just stopping by and introducing myself and finding a better time for me to come over and answer whatever questions you guys have. But what's the first thing that comes to your mind? Okay. And then I take it from there.
Okay, so typically right after you say that pitch, how do they react?
It's mixed. They're usually interested, or I try to be like really standoffish, like not pressure at all. Like I'm not supposed to work out. It's going to take a couple months.
And that's good. I really like that.
But that's the reason why I'm getting anywhere in it is because I'm trying to do things like that. And that's when I heard about your content, I was like, oh my gosh, this is unbelievable.
Well, it's true. That's kind of a negative reverse because you're saying, well, I'm not quite convinced that I could even help you yet. In fact, I'm not sure. I'd have to ask you, it might be appropriate if I knew a little bit more about your home to see if what we're doing here would even work for you because I'm not sure it would. So you'd kind of step back, right? So, and we'll go over this, but just kind of the wording you used is good, but let's make it a little bit tighter there. So instead of saying, well, I'm not quite sure, if it'll help you yet, just say, I'm not quite convinced that I can even help you yet. Just like that. You're totally detached, right? Because now, first of all, I would never say, and I was, back in the day when I sold security, we said the same thing. I'm not here to sell you anything.
Yeah.
Now, I have to ask you, how many door-to-door salespeople selling anything do you think say the exact same thing when they first knock on the
door? A lot of them.
Probably like 80%, right?
Definitely.
So most of these people have probably heard that, right? So there's certain things that you say, Joseph, that will automatically trigger sales resistance, right? Mm-hmm. So if they've heard that before, a lot of times you're going to get kind of a negative reaction, right? Or they might be a little bit standoffish to you. Now, I like your approach. That's probably why you're selling a lot more than most people that sell Sorta, because you're more standoffish and you're not in their face and you're more low-key. So that has something that you really have going for you. Now, let me ask you this. How many sales do you typically average a month in solar?
I'm averaging 20, and that's like the best in the company is averaging 20.
Out of all the salespeople in all Solar City?
Yeah.
That's awesome. How much income does that generate for you on a monthly basis?
This year I'm doing really well this year. But I never made any money before. This year I've been paid, the first 3 months I've been paid like $103,000.
$103,000. Okay, so you're averaging what, $35,000 a month, right?
Yeah.
So that's really good. So that's $400,000 a year. Okay?
Yeah.
Now, when you say you work your ass off to get that, how many hours are you talking about?
I'm out of my apartment before 10 a.m., and I haven't been back in my apartment before 9 p.m. since
how many days
October
of the week?
1st. 6 days a week, Monday through Saturday.
Do you have a family?
No, not yet. No.
Okay, so single guy, you're on the door 6 days of the week, so you're saying probably working 70, 80 hours a week?
Easy, yeah.
How long do you think you'll be able to keep doing that?
Not long.
Okay, right. And that's kind of like burned out, right? So when I was in door-to-door, that's why they'd only send us out there 4 months of the year because salespeople just get completely burned out, right? Mm-hmm. And it's like, shoot me, okay? So you're doing that month after month after month, okay? Mm-hmm. So unless we change that, you're pretty much – so how many doors does it take you knocking on percentage-wise, do you think? Just give me a roundabout number before you actually make a sale. Take you 10 doors, 5 doors, 20 doors?
It doesn't if I knock 10 doors, I can get an appointment, and then half the appointments flake and half the appointments keep.
Why do you think they flake?
Probably just being nice to me, to set the appointment to get me to...
They're trying to get rid of you, right?
Yeah, either the only reason they do it, either skepticism is huge, like free solar, like obviously they won't use the word free, so they're very skeptical. I'm doing this in Texas. Texas market just barely opened up, and so there's not a lot of it. But the skepticism or, they're just being nice, don't know about it.
They're trying to get rid of you, right? Because they feel maybe some pressure. They feel like, and not necessarily pressure. They just, like I said, there's certain words that you're saying that might trigger that. Like, I'm not here to sell anything. That might be like the first thing, like, oh, salesperson, right? Automatically. So I would just say, I would just eliminate that word. I'm not here to sell you anything. Now, by me saying this to you, Joseph, I want you to understand, I don't want you to go out here and completely change the first party door approach until you understand the whole process. Okay?
Yeah.
Because if you just go out there and just kind of change it and you're like kind of unsure and you don't know what to do next, you're going to lose sales. Okay?
Yep.
So I want you to really hone in on these sales training calls and really go through that material in your spare time, your 30 minutes of spare time a day, until you really get a good grip on this, and then change over. Okay. So what I would do first, and I'm trying to think of solar. So what problems does solar actually solve for people? Can you give me a couple of different problems it actually solves?
Yeah, the problem setting the three general ones, clean energy versus dirty energy, and then on knowing what your utility bill is, like the certainty, locking in a low rate. And then when people look at the utility bill, there's like a bunch of charges on there that nobody understands, and yet they can't get away with, whereas solar is just one charge. It's just the energy that's locked in.
How much do they typically save by going with solar per month?
It's half and half. Texas is deregulated, so they can choose their different companies. So half my customers save, half my customers actually pay a little bit more.
Why would they pay more? I don't understand that. What does that mean?
You can choose your energy provider in Texas, and so everyone pays a different rate, and so some people are paying a little bit more, and some people are paying a little bit less. Generally, like, the savings isn't very much when there is savings. I mean, they're either going to pay about 10-15% more, or say it's anywhere from 20 to 30%. Either way, there's a swing.
Okay, so when they're buying, why are they buying? Is it just to save 10% on their utility bill, or is it because they want clean energy, or what are the reasons why people are like, yeah, I love solar?
The locked in rate.
Okay.
Knowing what their utility bill will be for the next 20 years. Added home value.
So is it a locked-in rate for how many years?
It's a locked-in rate for 20 years. They have a 2.9% escalator.
What does a 2.98% or 2.9% escalator mean?
Yeah, it can. So, like in Texas, we're 10.9 cents a kilowatt, and the most it can raise is 2.9% a year, which is a third of a penny. So, 10.9 cents next year, 11.2 cents next year, 11.5 cents.
Okay, so solar can raise that, or the energy provider can raise that.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so what I would do is, because I would treat this like kind of like a cold call, because you're just knocking on their door. Okay, so number one, I would still be standoffish, like you don't know if you can help them, right? Because you, as a problem finder and solver, you have to detach yourself, right? Like you really don't know. If you're truly trying to find problems and see if you can solve them, you really don't know if you can help them, right? Until you ask questions to find out, right? So you have to think of yourself. So I want you to, it's almost like you're an actor, right? So as an actor, you have lines, and you have a certain, like if you're Brad Pitt and you're in a movie, you actually become that person, right? So as a salesperson, I want you to think of yourself as a problem finder and problem solver, and there's a possibility you might not be able to help them. And I want you to be okay with that. Like, think of that in your mind, because when they feel that you're okay with walking away because you feel that you can't help them, they will become a lot more open to you.
Absolutely.
Does that make sense? Because if you're open to them and what they're saying, they become open to you. It's just like it's normal relationship 101. It's pretty easy to understand when we break it down, right? So what I would say is, and like I said, we're going to cover a little bit of this right now and then go back to week 3 on cold calling, and we're going to hone this in. So when they knock on the door, now, hey, number one, I need to ask you this because I'm trying to understand your industry. Do they have to own their home to have solar panels?
Yeah, they have to own the house, but they literally never come out of pocket ever.
So they have to be a homeowner.
Yeah, they have to be a homeowner, and they don't pay anything like that. We install it without even. I never have to ask for payment information.
Yeah, okay, yeah, they just save money on the bill. Okay, so good. Okay, that's good. Okay, so I would, when I knock on the door, I would say, are you the homeowner here? or something like that. I would say, and like I said, work with me on this, Joseph, because, like I said, I'm not in your industry, so we got to tie this in. We'll go back and forth a few things. So I would say something like, I was. Let's say they knock on the door. I would say, hey, it's Jeremy. I was just wondering if you could possibly help me out for a moment. So I was wondering if you could possibly help me out for a moment. That's what I would start out with. So either I would say, are you the homeowner here first? Because you want to find out if they own the home, right? So that's just a find out question. So are you the homeowner? They say, yeah, okay, well, I was wondering if you could help me out for a moment. That's probably what I would do. I would language it that way. So are you the homeowner here? Yeah, we're the homeowner. Okay, I was wondering if you could possibly help me out for a moment. And they say, sure, how can I help you? Most people are going to say, yeah, how can I help you, right? That's kind of our human nature, okay? Now, what I would do when they would say that, so do you remember in week 3 going through what I call your problem statement?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What do you remember from that, just off the top of your head?
It's like, well, you know how, like, the problem statement is like, well, you know how a lot of people, and I'm listing like the 2 or 3 generic problems that they have.
Yeah.
And then, well, what I do is help people, you know, like.
Well, that's your personalized introduction, which we'll do that in a minute.
Okay.
But first, we want a problem statement. You're getting close. Like I said, you're learning the material, right? So you would, when they say, well, yeah, sure, how can I help you? And that's when you're going to be standoffish. You're going to say, well, I'm not quite convinced that you could help me, but I knocked on your door, so I'm not quite sure yet if you could help me. So I'm not quite sure you could yet. But I knocked on your door to see if you'd be open to. So that's going to be the format. I knocked on your door to see if you'd be open to, and then we need to list a few problems. Okay, so here's where we need to come up with those problems. What are a couple problems that they would be familiar with that are very specific that they would be like, oh, yeah, of course. What would be those 2 problems?
Yeah, the couple problems are like people are always having to switch their provider to keep a locked-in rate. Like people are usually like always having to shop like every 3 months, 6 months here to keep a low rate locked in. That, and then people are they have multiple charges on their bill, and then that nobody even knows about, and then just rate hikes. You know, like how things have always continued to go up and gone up. Okay,
so you telling me those 3 problems? In my mind, the biggest problem would be rate hikes, right? Because they're having to pay more money, right? So to me, that would be the biggest problem. And then the second biggest problem is always trying to switch providers to lock in their rate, right? Or to is that what you said? Like always having to switch providers every 3 to 6 months to find a better rate. To me, those would be the 2 biggest problems because nobody wants to pay more money, right? And nobody wants to do what? Take the time every 3 or 4 months to find a new provider, right? So to me, that would be your problem statement. So let's figure out how we're going to put this in here. Well, I'm not sure so they say, well, yeah, sure, how can I help you? Well, I'm not quite sure you could yet, but I knocked on your door to see if you'd be open to looking at, and then we need to somehow put these problems into that problem statement. So this is, and like I said, this is off the top of my head. So it's might not be what you want to use, but I'm just kind of giving you some examples. So I'm not quite sure. What's that?
No, I love it.
Okay. So let's see. Rate hike, switch provider to lock in the rate. I'm trying. Like I said, I want to make sure this is good for you and not off the top of my head here. I'm not quite sure. So they say, well, how can I help you? And then you would say, well, I'm not quite sure that you could yet, but I knocked on your door to see if you'd be open to looking at any possible rate hikes. How we do this? Any possible rate hikes that you might be experiencing on your current utility bill. Write that down, would you? So, I'm not quite sure. I'm not quite sure that you could yet, but I knocked on your door to see if you'd be open to looking at any possible rate hikes in your current utility bill that you might not be aware of. Would that? And I don't know if that would resonate with anybody, Joseph, but would that resonate with anybody where they're like, "Oh, you rate hikes? What do you mean rate hikes?"
One or two things. Like they either because they can always switch the company, going from one to the other to the other. But at the same time, like even though they've done that, it's still gone up on them 50% in the last 10 years.
Okay. So in my mind, I'm not quite sure you could yet, but I knocked on your door to see if you'd be open to looking at any possible rate hikes in your current utility bill that you might not be aware of. Now, if we said that, what do you think they would say at that point, just off the top of your head? Would they say, what do you mean by that, or what would they say?
It would either be one or two things. Either I think they'd be open to it, or they would be like, no, I shop every 3 months and I got a really low rate locked in, you know.
Okay.
And I think more often than not they'd be open to that. And then I would say like a third of them or a little bit less would be, no, I just switched in, I got a good low rate, da-da-da-da.
Okay, so let's say they said that. Oh, I just switched over, I got a good rate. Oh, curious, who did you switch over to? So this is when you would then start down background questions. Do you see where we're at? So they would just open it right. It would be a natural conversation. Oh, that's not a problem. So you'd say, that's not a problem. I'm curious, who did you switch over to? Oh, I switched to, I don't know what your companies are called. I switched to GE or whatever.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. How long have you been with them? Oh, 6 months. Oh, do you like using them? Oh, yeah, we love them. Oh, what do you like about it? Oh, we like this, we like that. Anything else you like about that utility, your rate now? Oh, we like this. Okay. Well, to me, it sounds like things are going fairly well for you. I mean, is there anything you would change about the service you're using if you could? Now, would there be anything that they would change about that service if they could? Because I don't know your industry.
Yeah, I'm sure there's some charge on there that they wouldn't like.
Right. So that would bring it up. Remember the two truths where we talked about that in like week 3 or week 4? People have two truths.
Yep.
So you'd say, well, to me, it sounds like things are going fairly well for you with this new company. Is there anything you would change about your service with them if you could? Now, if they say, no, there's nothing I would change, oh, okay. I mean, is this your dream company that you're using, or would you rather possibly be open to looking at something else? And if they say no, move on to the next door. Now, I highly doubt it that they're going to say no to that very often, okay? But if in case they do with the rate hike where they're like, no, we have that rate hike, blah, 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 that's not a problem. Tell me, who did you switch over to? I was just curious. Oh, we use this company. Oh, and how long did you switch to them? So you're just going to start asking background questions. You see how that works?
Yeah.
Now, if they say, when you say that problem statement about where we go back and we say, I'm not quite sure if you could yet, but I knocked on your door to see if you'd be open to looking at any possible rate hikes in your current utility bill that you might not be aware of. And they say, well, how does that work, or how would I know that? Then you want to do your personalized introduction. Does that make sense?
Okay.
That's when you bring up the personalized introduction, okay? So then you would be like, oh, okay, well, yeah, I can go through some of those details. So you would do it like this. Yeah, let's do this. Before I go through all, that stuff, here's kind of what we do. So that's when you use that personalized introduction. You say, well, yeah, you know how a lot of people in this area, and Joseph, help me if I'm wrong here. I'm just paraphrasing here. So you know how a lot of people in this area sometimes get frustrated because of all the rate hikes that their company keeps doing to them, and then they have to go shop for new companies every 3 or 4 or 6 months.
Wow,
what I do is blah, 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 blah. Does that make sense?
Wow, that was money.
See
that?
These
are recorded, right?
Yeah, this is recorded, and you'll have the PDFs within 24 to 48 hours of the call, just so you know. We do the PDFs here, okay? So that's your introduction. Well, you know how a lot of people in this area sometimes get frustrated because of all the rate hikes in their utility bills? And you nod your head when you're doing this. Nod your head. Because of all the rate hikes in their utility bills, and they get mad or they get upset because they're always having to switch to different companies every 3 to 6 months to find a better rate. Well, what we do at Solar City is we help people like that, A, B, C.
Wow.
And then right after you do that, you're going to ask the background question. Now tell me, who do you actually use for your service? See how you do that?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, Joe, I don't want you to go out and do that tomorrow. I want you to write it all down, and I want you to rehearse it over and over and over in your spare time and get the right background questions to ask. And on some of these training calls, Joseph, we'll work on those background questions for your industry, okay, if you bring it up to me, okay? But the first background question I would ask would be, well, who do you use now for your service?
Yep.
Okay, and how long have you been with them? I'm curious, what got you involved with XYZ company? Okay, do you like your service with them? We don't really like it. Well, what don't you like about it? Or, yeah, we love it. What do you like about it? See how you take them down that path?
Yeah, go
ahead.
That's right. So usually with solar, they can cancel any time. And so that's why they really focus on a two-touch. Like you show up. A lot of times you talk with the one-leggers, and so you want to set up an appointment to catch both people home to come back and give a presentation with. So after you do this, is that when you set an appointment with them, or knowing that?
Man, I don't. If you do it this way, I mean, if you do it the way that I'm showing you how to do it, there's so much trust there that you could actually go through a lot of this, and I don't think you'd have to set a second appointment, which would probably reduce a lot of your time, right?
Wow, that'd be amazing.
I just don't think you would have to, because even though, let's say they have to get the other person on the phone or talk to them or whatever, you can always come back. But a lot of times they'll just be able to make the decision like a no-brainer because they trust you so much and you're so low-key. There's no pressure. They're like, wow, I'm not having any money out of my pocket. If I was selling what you were doing, I would rarely set up a second appointment.
Wow, love it.
Yeah, I mean, that'd probably reduce your working hours in half, I'm assuming. Running around for all those appointments all the time.
It really would.
Yeah. That help you?
It really did. Thank you so much.
Perfect.
You have no idea.
Perfect, Joseph. Okay, guys, I've got time for one more question. I usually do not want to have these training calls go more than 90 minutes. So if you've got another question, just *6 right now to hop out with any questions. I know that question probably helped a lot of people, Joseph, so I appreciate you asking that.
Hey, thank you so much. I'm being so serious. Thank you. I really appreciate it.
No worries, man. Keep tearing it up, dude. $35,000 is really, really good, but we can get you, I mean, once you learn these skills, your income can literally double. Like, I've trained a lot of salespeople that make $30,000 a month in their sales jobs that once they went through this training, like I've got people that went from $30,000 a month to $100,000 a month and work less. So I think that's available.
Definitely in the cards.
Perfect. Okay, guys, any other questions before we end the training call tonight? Just *6 to unmute yourself. *6.
Hey, Jeremy, it's Brett.
Hey, Brett. What's your question, big guy?
You can go over the email next week, but I speak each week in front of a bunch of real estate agents about coaching, personal development with Bob Proctor that I work with. Okay. So, after going through the 8 weeks, I've kind of started to switch a few things up, like not necessarily presenting my solution right away, but also like trying to converse with the agents. There's usually 10, 15, 20 people there.
That's a perfect setting for this, actually.
Yes, yeah. So I'm trying to figure out how to start that off, especially, and how to find out what their problems and needs are, so it doesn't seem like pushy, like right in the beginning.
Okay, so
presenting that solution.
And I'm trying to understand your industry.
Mm-hmm.
So you sell personal development coaching for Bob Proctor?
Essentially, yeah. It's a 6-month coaching program. Really, it's a personal development program. It's a self-study program that I take them through. I'm not really their coach. It's more of just, they study. Just kind of like your 8 weeks. It's all the materials there, and then I do a weekly training call. I guess it's kind of like that.
Okay, that's good. Now, how do you get these people in the room? Like, how do they hear of you? How are they there? How do you generate the lead?
So my last business, I worked with Cutco, and we did business gifts for a lot of real estate agents. So I spoke already at a lot of their offices. So I have hundreds of realtor clients already for my past business. So I'm just with my new business, I'm switching the pitch, I guess you could say. Not a pitch, but talk.
Okay. So do they know why they're there? Like, they show up in the room, there's 10 people. Yeah. Do they know why we're here with Brett?
It's a team meeting, usually just a weekly team meeting. So, usually the broker or the manager brings someone in to speak each week, generally.
Okay.
So, no, they're not going, they're kind of coming in blind.
Okay, so they're coming in blind, and you're up there talking about personal development, yada, 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 right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so they're there. They know that they're going to get coaching, personal development. So, okay, so here is...
And a lot of times the broker just says, yeah, Brett has a new business. He wants to talk to you about that. Or the introductions are, not exactly ideal, but so it's overcoming that as well.
So typically when he says that, what do you say when you get up in front of everybody?
What do I say in the beginning?
Yeah. So he says, hey, Brett's got a new business he wants to tell you about. Brett, the floor is yours. What does Brett say?
Yeah. I would start off with sharing, I guess, gratitude. I'm so grateful to be here today and share this information with you that's absolutely changed my life and could potentially, do the same for you. I tell them a little bit why the reason is, but it wasn't always like that. I was stuck last year. I wasn't feeling fulfilled with what I was doing until I heard Bob speak, and I knew exactly right when I heard him, I want to do what he was doing, help people create a life they really want to live and everything.
Okay. Can I ask you something?
Mm-hmm.
Your first 30 seconds, who is that focused on, you or your potential customers in the room?
Mm-hmm. Me.
Okay. You're like, me? Yeah.
Yeah.
So we want to change that where instead of focusing on you, because that for anybody, when you get up there and you start focusing on you, it typically will create some anxiety with you, right? But more importantly, it creates anxiety with the people you're talking to because most people care about who?
Yeah, them. What's
in it
for them?
What's in it for them? So when they hear somebody come up there, I know, I'm so grateful, and I like that. I'm grateful to be up here. I think that's good. But when you start focusing on, I was in here and I was doing this, and we never want to use the word I. Like throw
your
that
story, your story right away.
Throw your story out of there because nobody cares. I hate to tell you that, but nobody cares. Like when I give my introduction about, I did this and I did that, nobody really cares, right? They want to know what's in it for me. Right? How can this person help me solve my problems? Right? Now, these people don't necessarily know they have problems yet. Right? So you have to be a what? You have to be a problem finder and a problem solver. So when you get up there, and like I said, this is just off the top of my head. I mean, I'm going to have to have some time to really think about this, dude. And it would help me if I had kind of a script of this kind of written out. But anyways, when you get up there, never focus on I. Okay? So when you get up there, I appreciate the opportunity I have to be here, and as my good colleague Joe said, I do have a business, and this may or may not resonate with you. Well, something like that. Like I said, Brett, this is hard for me because I need to really think through your industry, your situation about how you would start that, because you'd want to start off with some type of
push away
connecting.
Or something.
What's that?
Some less pressure, I guess you could say, in the beginning. This may or may not.
Yeah. You don't want to say, I'm excited to share this with you, because what does every salesperson say? I'm excited to share this with you. This has done wonders for my life. I know it can possibly help you. Like it's kind of like I told Joseph, there's certain wording that you use that triggers people to look at you as somebody trying to sell them something, right? So their guard's automatically up. Like, what's this person trying to sell me? Okay? Mm-hmm. So when you get up there, it's more focused on them. I'm just trying to think of some connecting questions we would ask, because you'd want to ask a couple of connecting questions.
Yeah.
Now, since they're there in that room and you didn't advertise, it'd have to be a little bit different, because in week 3, I think I teach you some connecting questions. Week 3, I teach you connecting questions when they respond to your ad or, they requested information. So none of these people have responded to an ad. They've not requested information. These are like cold people, basically, in the room. Okay.
Unless they know me, from my past business, but which is trust built up. Most no.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So what I would do is I would do some type of personal introduction. That's how I would probably start out that. Okay. So have you come up with a personalized introduction for what you sell?
Where personal introduction? Let me see.
Well, you know how a lot of people, and you're going to list 2 or 3 generic problems. This, how a lot of people X, Y, and Z. Well, what I do is X, Y, and Z, and then, then you go into background questions. So the way I would start off yours is, And also what I would do, have you gone through the 21-day sales challenge as well?
I haven't watched all the videos. I'm just going through it each day. So I'm like day 12 right
There
now.
is a video that I specifically have on how to start a meeting in there.
Yeah.
I don't remember which one.
I started that the other day. I started it like that the other day. And
listen to that because you can apply some of that. Yeah, you can apply some of that to what you do. Yeah,
before I go into what I
so
do.
when he says, hey, Brett, come on up here and tell us what you have.
I think it'd be appropriate. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you would go up there and say, before, let's do this. I mean, but I don't want to bore you to death, but before I go into who I am and what we do and all that kind of boring stuff, it might be appropriate if I knew a little bit more about the people here in the group to see if what I'm doing could even help any of you. For instance, and then you would start asking some background
questions, yeah.
Yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah.
And actually, you could do it one of two ways, or you could do a personalized introduction. You can say, basically, here's what I do. You know how a lot of people, and okay, so what would be 2 or 3 generic problems that your solution solves for people? If you don't have them, come up with those. But I'm saying if you have them, let me know.
Yeah, well, I guess the solution, what it solves is, I mean, most people don't really. Most people think. Most people would rather die than actually think. So it helps them take control of their mind, which is their most valuable.
Well, that's your solution. But what are the problems?
What are the problems?
That's your solution. What are the problems?
Yeah. Most people don't know why they're actually getting the results they're getting. So it helps them understand what's causing it.
So you know how a lot of people get frustrated because they can't figure out why they're not having the success they're wanting. Right?
And they know they can do a lot. Yeah, and they know they can do a lot better, and people usually nod their heads there.
Okay, but we don't want to say that. We just 2 or 3 generic problems. So you know how a lot of people nowadays get frustrated because sometimes they can't figure out why they're not having success that they want. So that would be one generic problem, right? So you know how a lot of people sometimes get frustrated because they can't figure out why they're not having success. And then what would be another one?
Yeah, I guess, they're not earning the amount of money they really want to earn. Definitely.
Okay, so
income's always
you know a lot of people get frustrated because they can't figure out why they're not having success, then they're not making the money that they feel that they know they can make. Well, what I do is, and then what do? What I do is I help people like that. Yeah. Well, what I do is I help people like that do what?
Well, I help. Now I'm trying to tailor to this.
It takes a while to think. I know.
Yeah.
Well, what I do is I help people like that.
Help them like that. Take quantum leaps in their results. Something around those lines.
I wouldn't use quantum leaps. It sounds too generic and too flashy. Well, what I do is I help people like that and get very specific, Brett. Like list 2 or 3 things and be extremely specific. I help people like that, X, Y, Z, but it needs to be very short. It doesn't need to be like I help people take quantum leaps and grow their mind. It just sounds too salesy. Does that make sense? So I want you to work on that, but at least you got the first part of that introduction. Well, you know how a lot of people, what I do is, you know how a lot of people sometimes get frustrated because they can't figure out why they're not having success. They don't earn the money that they want, and because of that, it makes them feel, frustrated, stressed, worried, and nod your head, because those would be problems that those people would be, that they would know about, right? They'd be like, yeah, that's me. Well, what I do is I help people like that and then come up with 2 or 3 things your solution helps them with, okay? And if and then at that point, that's when I would say. So just real quick, so I know who's in the group. Can you guys tell me what you do for a living now, and then ask a couple people. And do you have a whiteboard you can write on, like when you're there at the group?
Not usually, but they're all real estate agents, so I don't know if I'd really ask that question.
Okay, so you wouldn't ask that question. So, okay, so we've got to come up with some background questions, but like I said, we're an hour and 45 minutes for the call, so we're going to have to do that on another call. Does that help you?
Yeah, it does. I just need to get more clear on that problem statement, I guess.
Yeah, you have to write it down, dude. You have to write this down. Like when I first started learning the new model of selling, I took flashcards, Brett. I would literally write down everything. Personalized introduction, background questions, 2 to 3 of those, 2 to 3 problem questions, 2 to 3 of this, 2 to 3 of that, and I carried around those flashcards like they were like I was a 2-year-old with a teddy bear in a blanket. Like everywhere I went. I sat on the couch to watch TV. I'd pick those up during the commercials and read them. I'd go into my bedroom at night, practice in the mirror. I'd go out in the yard, practice walking around. I mean, it takes work. If you want to get up to making $500,000 a year of sales income, or $750,000 or $1 million, even $250,000, it takes work, right? To get to those levels, we have to become very good at the craft. And it only does that. I wasn't born with those skills. I just learned how to do them, right? Somebody taught me, and I just took it to the next level of that. You with me?
Yep. No, that's awesome.
Okay, Cowboy. I love you, man. You're doing good. Keep posting, questions on those threads. I do my best to try to get with you. As we just launched 60 days ago, we've had tons of people just come in as well, and a lot of them can't figure out how to get on those threads, so that's why you see like 60 or 70 people on each one. There's actually hundreds. They just never got on them, so we're trying to get those people on those threads. So as we get busier and busier, I will have a couple of my other top salespeople I've trained come in and answer some of those questions with me just to keep up with you guys. Okay?
Great. No, thank you for all your help. I mean, even with your past help with the other guy, I forget his name now. Just awesome. It helps any industry. We all relate to it.
Yep, perfect. Yeah, and we'll work on that email as well. So remember, everybody, the call will be next week, Monday night at 9 p.m. Eastern, 8 Central, 7 Mountain, 6 Pacific Standard Time. This call's a wrap. It will be recorded. You'll see it in your members area within 24 hours from now. So make sure you go back, take notes. PDFs will be back there in a day or two as well. This call's a wrap. Thanks, everybody. Have a great evening, morning, or afternoon, whatever country or time zone you're in. Thanks, guys.